Hello and welcome. We're going to be learning some magic today. Going over all the laws of magic this week and next week until the DLC comes out. We should have most of them covered by then. We're covering the most popular and the most deadly to start with. Laws of fire, laws of life, beasts, dark, and what's the other one? What was the other one?
Fire,
It was
life,
fire, life,
death,
death,
high, dark, and
high,
and beast. Sorry.
and dark and beasts. Where's dark? Dark is of course, the dark elf one. There it is. And beasts is
Specifically the non-high elf beast.
yeah, specifically because when talking about wood elf that isn't there too. I think as well that this is ordered so that it's in orders of laws when they were added. So with technically speaking, all of these base ones were added in game 1, so they all came in at the same time, and all the other ones came in progressively over time. And with the most recent one being the Deliverance of Ita from old Croaky, who was added with the 3LC for Shadow and the Blade.
Probably.
I think that was when Gorok was added. And then before that was Law of Deep, Law of Nakara with the 2 DLC, and then the rest was just Game 2 ones. I think did Law of Beasts come out with... No, I think Law of the Wild came out with Beastmen, and then Law of Beasts must have come out with Wood Elves.
I couldn't tell you. I remember
Yeah, I
being
can't
this
remember.
game.
We didn't remember much from Game 1. But anyway, first we'll be looking at Law of Fire. We've got a couple of replays to go through, but having just a quick glance back at the spells, so that everyone's aware of them. Cascading Fire Cloak, an augment to apply to a single target, a duration of 19 seconds, 24 melee defense, and armor piercing damage. Typically you're just doing it for the melee defense. I don't think many people take the armor piercing weapon damage into that much of consideration, because 24 melee defense for full winter magic is pretty good, especially when it lasts 19 seconds.
Yeah, we also we cast all the spells in each replay.
Nice.
So we could talk about them there as well.
Yeah, I'll also have to mention how you don't bring all spells in games, just to make sure people are aware of that.
These were just examples.
Yeah. Fireball is a pretty good sniping tool, whether or not that be single entities, artillery, or monstrous infantry. Typically you don't use it against infantry, it's being used here. I'd say it's better use taking out single targets of things. You can overcast it so that it does way more damage, but overcasting will increase the magic cost by 4. Typically it's 5, overcasting it comes to 9, and also it gives a miscast chance. Miscasting is a chance of happening, and it'll cause damage to the spellcaster. The spell will usually still cast when it miscasts. Sometimes it'll bug out when it won't, but when it miscasts, the spell will still cast. It'll just cause a random amount of damage to the caster, which can be quite detrimental because casters typically don't have very large health pools. So, Cascading Fire Cloak does not have an overcast. Not every spell has an overcast. Some overcasts are affected differently. Like some magic missiles might just get increased range as opposed to damage, so it's important to look at the overcast before you click it, because it might not be worth your time at all. Flaming Sword of Ruin is an area of effect augment, so it can affect multiple people. It increases base weapon strength, but it also applies magic and fire damage. Typically you are just bringing this for the magic damage in case there's a ethereal unit you can't deal with, or things with just high physical resistance or low fire resistance. You throw this on, and it will help them win. Typically, the base weapon damage itself doesn't have that much of an effect. You're just doing it to apply magic damage to a unit or two.
It helps win infantry fights if you're pretty evenly matched
Yeah.
as well on your front line.
Even more so if they're specifically they have you're fighting rangers which have a bit of physical resistance, so you're fighting dryads which have both physical resistance and a weakness to fire. So just whenever you want magic damage but you don't want to bring a unit, you bring Flaming Sword of Ruin, so that you can make up for that.
Just bring it.
Oh yeah, speaking of which, overcasting just increases the effect duration. Nothing too flashy to go out of that. Increases it, I think it doubles it. Yeah, it doubles it. But again, there's that miscast chance, and it increases the cost by 4. So typically overcasting is usually worth it, but it comes with a miscast chance, so you have to be wary of that's probably going to happen to you. Burning Head is your just a real basic wind spell. It's probably one of the best one out there as well. A really long travelling. I'm sure we'll see a lot of it in some of the replays. Mostly good against low armor. It won't anything over 70 armor. It has less of an effect about. Your ideal target you want to be hitting with this is lightly armored masses of infantry. Everything else doesn't really take any damage from it. If you try using it, even if it's a blob of monsters, they won't take like any damage because there's only a certain amount of damage it can do per model. And so to a single entity that would do nothing. It does of course do magic and fire damage. It also applies the burnt debuff, which I think Fireball does as well. No, it's just the Burning Head that does that. Some fire effects have a leadership debuff they can apply, and this one applies -8 for 10 seconds. Which, especially when you're dealing with weak, like lowly armored units, they typically have low leadership, so this can pair quite well if you put it on the front line. It lasts a full 20 seconds. It does travel for a really long amount of time, but it can be known to sway left or right sometimes. So be mindful of where you're casting it. Of course, you don't want to be hitting your own units because that burnt effect will still affect them as well, I believe.
Yeah, it doesn't travel straight. You'll end up having it curve most of the time, so one way or the other.
Overcasting it increases the damage by quite an amount, which it doesn't affect its armor piercing value though, so I don't usually think overcasting is worth it when it comes to Burning Head because you're already killing lightly armored models most of the time. You don't really need to overcast it for like an extra 6 winds of magic and a chance of damaging your caster. I think just using basic Burning Head is way easier. Piercing Bolts of Burning is a bombardment spell, a very powerful bombardment spell. A duration of 9 seconds. Duration doesn't really take into account. The only thing in terms of time that you have to consider is how long it takes for it to hit the ground, because people can see, the enemy will be able to see where the bombardment spell is coming down, so when a bombardment spell takes a really long time, people can just move out of the way. And I'm sure we'll see that in certain other spells why they're not very good. But the bombardment spell, this Piercing Bolt, does have quite a long time to come down, so it can be moved out of the way, especially since it doesn't have a huge area of effect. But it does do a really large amount of damage. Like pretty much anything in that radius will take a serious beating. It works well against single entities, monstrous infantry, everything. It's just as long as it stays there. You really need to be using it on something that's standing still or is really tied down or netted or something, because it's quite easy to move out of the way.
Good for late game where you get the blob up starting to happen. It'll really help clear a blob, especially on a single entity.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can also wipe out certain artillery crews in one hit if you can manage to get the cast onto it. But I think it depends on the crew and like how spaced out is it, and also if they're quick enough to move it away. Overcasting increases the number of missiles and a wider area of effect, which can help with them not being able to get out of it, and it also just means you're going to do even more damage to anything in that area of effect. So it does do a fair amount. Next, Vortex spell, Flamestorm. I believe, is Flamestorm the cheapest? No, Chain Lightning is the cheapest, I think, with 11. But a very cheap, one of the most efficient Vortex spells, I think, Flamestorm. It does really good against armor. It does good against lightly armored. It's got a good pathway to it, where it does tend to usually do like an S shape. We'll have to see how it moves in the replay. And it lasts quite a fair amount of time. So if you throw this into the middle of like an enemy formation, you can really mess things up. Even if they're forced to move out the way, that's like precious movements that the enemy has to make up for.
No guarantee the direction it will travel. You could cast it and have it completely hit.
Yeah. There tends to be a bit of a pattern, but there are definitely anomalies that can happen. It'll just go completely the other way.
If it hits well, it'll win you the battle. If it doesn't, then you've wasted magic.
Yeah, so you really have to determine the placement of it, just so you're making sure that your chances are the best. Like right in the middle of the enemy formation is usually the best place to put it, because no matter what, you're probably going to hit something. Just be careful not to put it anywhere near your lines, because of course it can just turn around and mess up your entire game plan. Can be overcast as well. I think that, yeah, it increases damage and it means it lasts longer. When it comes to Vortex spells, making it last longer doesn't usually seem to be worth it, because often they'll just move so far away from the enemy formation that they're just going off on their own for an extra 20 seconds. So it's usually just that increased. But even then, the increased damage, Flamestorm already does like a really good, decent amount of damage. So I'd say not worth overcasting Flamestorm 90% of the time, unless you think you're in a free fall and you see all of the enemy armies on top of each other. In that case, sure, go nuts. Have fun, because it'll do all the money's worth and
Absolutely.
more.
Next up, do life.
Life, yes. A good opposite was Fire, of course. You can see it overall supportive and mostly destructive. I mean, there's 4 damaging spells and 2 augments. Life is pure. Well, it's meant to be pure support. Its main access is the healing, but you notice there's only 2 damaging spells compared to the 4 for Fire.
One of the cheapest area of effect damaging spells as well.
Yeah, Awakening in the Woods does not the largest amount of damage, but it does apply a nice speed debuff, and it's fairly cheap, as Necrotic said, only 6 power cost.
I usually bring it on my caster just in case if they're riding around their horse they get caught. You can kind of break them out of there.
Yeah, it'll do fairly decent damage against like low tier infantry, but you could also just use it against cavalry just to slow them down. But it is a good breakout tool as well, especially since there's no longer a minimum casting range. You can just cast it directly on top of him if he gets caught in some low tier infantry. Not only does it mean he's going to get out, but it means nothing's going to be able to catch him that gets affected by it, because it's 48 speed decrease. But yeah, I'd say it's probably something. The only problem with it is it competes with like Earthblood in terms of where your winds and magic go. But I'd say if you're expecting some form of low tier infantry, just any like unarmored infantry, I'd say probably worth taking.
It's worth taking because it's a very cheap gold cost, and even if you don't cast it,
it's still there, just in the back.
It's good to have that little tool.
And because, as we'll see in the next spell, is 11 winter magic, sometimes you'll be left with just like 8, and then all you can cast is this. But speaking of the next spell, Earthblood. Oh, actually no, it's about the same cost actually. They're the same cost actually, so I just had the overcast clicked on. But anyway, talking about Earthblood, it's a healing spell. Regeneration that it applies to an area. Yeah, it should be noted that it can only affect 4 units at a maximum. So that is what you want to be hitting. The cost doesn't go up with more units in the area. So you ideally want to be casting this when you have 4 units in the area. But at the same time, it's perfectly good to just drop on a unit on its own. 336 hit points can sway your combat quite favourably into one direction or another. Or if you just have them moving like your lords low, you've got some cavalry, some single entities that are low, you can just pop that. If you group them all together and then pop it on all of them, because of course you can get up to like 1200 healing if you hit all 4 units at once, which for 6 winter magic is really good. There is pretty much no reason you take this. You wouldn't take this because it's one of the best spells in the game. The only thing that's not good about it is because it doesn't regenerate. It doesn't resurrect models, so it's not great to use on infantry. It will still help if they're already in combat, but it's not going to resurrect any models. So it's best used on single entities or low model infantry, low model monstrous infantry, cavalry, that sort of thing. Typically, go for if you see a unit that is low on models but really high on models and really low on health, that is the ideal unit to use on, because they can't resurrect. Overcasting it increases the duration, but that does also increase the healing because the healing happens over time. Which again, if you hit 4 units with this, it's insanely good for value in terms of how much healing you can get out of it. So I say overcast it if you have more than 1 unit in an area of effect that you can use it on. I wouldn't say it's 100% worth using it on just 1 unit because again you risk that miscast chance, and it's 11 winds of magic. So it would probably be just best when you have a big group of single entities all together that you want to heal up quickly. You can just spam this out and it'll heal them really efficiently. Really good spell. Always take it. Flesh to Stone is an augment for 6 winds of magic, which applies 60 armor to 1 friendly target for 44 seconds. Can be quite useful. It can catch certain factions off guard. If you're typically a lowly armoured faction, like Empire per se, and your infantry is typically low armour, if you apply Flesh to Stone to them, the enemy isn't probably going to bring armor piercing in their front line, so all of a sudden you have an armoured infantry in your front line for a full 44 seconds, which is like how long a combat will usually last between infantry. So that will usually affect them for the duration of the fight, which will help them hold out a lot longer. Even if you just want them to hold longer, not necessarily win, that 60 armor does help a lot if the enemy isn't armor piercing. Again, it's 6 winds of magic, a bit of a theme here between the 3 first spells. But when you're considering the cost of the winds of magic and the price overall, Earthblood probably would be the best out of the 3. So you have to sort of work out which ones are worth taking, which ones aren't. But seeing as you're almost always taking Earthblood, the other 2 sometimes just get let down in the back. Overcasting it just increases its duration to 88 seconds, which I think is a bit overkill. Typically you aren't going to have a unit in combat for that long. And not to mention it's 10 winds of magic, which could be going towards more Earthbloods. So I wouldn't recommend overcasting it. I think you'd only really bring it in certain situations, as opposed to Earthblood.
It's the life's give and take. Is no matter what spells you bring, if you use one that's not healing, you're wasting healing.
Mm-hmm. That is the plague of any healing lore, is that you realise your money is not healing. Next is another augment spell, this time an area of effect one, Shield of Thorns. It applies a 22% physical resistance and increases the base weapon strength by 30%. Good against AP, meaning that because of course AP does not go through physical resistance. So if you're fighting up against AP units, this will just decrease their damage flat out by 22% unless they're magical. Overall, a pretty good buff. I mean, if you can hit most of your front line with this, then you're probably getting your money's worth because it will really sway engagements in the front line really easily. Unless the enemy is like armored and magic damage causing, this is almost always going to have a positive effect.
Really good for like Bretonnia and Empire. Like if you have a Lifecaster, even High Elves, if you have a Lifecaster with your cavalry, really good spell that you can buff them if it's a tight cavalry engagement.
Yeah, typically, especially because your cavalry be like armored, and so their biggest threat is armor piercing. This minimizes the effect quite a bit. Also, most of the High Elf and Empire cavalry and the Bretonnian cavalry, most of that isn't armor piercing, so they get more out of the base weapon buff as well. And 22 seconds is a pretty good duration of time when handling with those units. Overcasting it increases the base weapon strength by a lot more, which again, not very good if you have an AP unit because it doesn't have much of an effect on the base weapon strength. But if you have a lot of high weapon strength units that aren't armor piercing, because it only affects base, then this would be definitely very good to put on. So again, if you have those big cavalry blobs that aren't armor piercing, and you apply that to it, it's going to drastically increase the damage that it's dealing. It is increased by 4 Winds of Magic and it has again a 50% miscast chance. But I'd say this is, if you're in the right situation, then this is probably worth plobbing onto. I'd imagine if you're going for a situation where you're going to have a lot of units travelling together, like if you have a cavalry stack, or if you just have like a goon squad of heroes, then this is probably worth bringing. This and Earthblood would help out an immense amount in those engagements. Now, something that isn't an AoE is a single target, regrowth, something you apply to a single thing as opposed to Earthblood, which can affect an area of units. It regenerates 1,392 hit points and restores 100% vigor. Now, that is pretty good single target healing, but it should be noted that it doesn't resurrect models. So this should only really be used on single entities or monstrous infantry that has a lot of its models left. Because if you use it on infantry, it will probably go to waste by quite a bit. Typically a spell you want to use as well towards the end of the game when that unit is exhausted, because it will completely regenerate its vigor, which can really swing their effectiveness. I can't remember the exact numbers, but when a unit's exhausted, its combat stats are reduced by quite a bit. I believe 13 Winds of Magic as well. If you compare that to the Earthblood healing, like 2 of these would give you about 600 healing. 1 of these gives you this much. So when you're dealing with single targets, this is much more mana efficient in terms of healing, and it also gives the vigor. But if you're dealing with a group of units, then Earthblood is better to take, especially if you overcast it, because if you get this on 4 units, it does way more than this does for about nearly half the cost, just over half the cost. So it depends on the situation, but both these spells typically see the usage. You can just bring Earthblood and just spam that out, but then you miss out on the improvement to vigor. And it's not as good on your like Lord or your single entity monster or those sort of targets that you really want to be casting regrowth on. Overcasting it gives even more healing. Same as Earthblood. 2,088 hit points, which is pretty much the hit cap, the regeneration limit of nearly any single entity. It's around, I think it's around 3,000 for most single entities, depending on their health pool. So this will almost hit their healing cap in one swoop. Which, compared to the overcasting of this spell, again, it's just all about that single target. If you have a single target that's really low on health, that's exhausted, this can bring it back to the fight like 100% strength. So, if you have that big lord, if you have that big single entity, if you've got Carl Friends, if you've got a steam tank per se, I don't know why this regrowth would work on a steam tank, but it does. Just cast this on it at the end of the battle, and all of a sudden you're going to swing the tide in your favour. All you have to do is just make sure your Lifecaster has enough magic, and he survives until the point where he's needed. Dwellers Below. The Dwellers Below. It's not very good. It's really bad, in fact. And some might say it's terrible. Some might say it's the worst spell in the game. It's meant to be a sort of stationary vortex direct damage spell. The only problem is it doesn't do much damage. It has a very large area of effect, but for the amount of winds of magic you're spending, 17 winds of magic is a lot of winds of magic. Even Overcast, it doesn't have any effect on its health, it only affects speed. Because it applies a debuff of 24% speed. 24% speed is not even that much. And even with 24% speed, most units can still get out of it before it's halfway finished. Because it lasts 15 seconds, units can usually move out of it in 7, considering how long it takes to cast. The fact that they can see it being cast usually means they can just move out of the way. And it does not do very much damage at all. And then you go ahead and compare it to Regrowth and Earthblood, where you can get way much value for your power cost. And it's a blue spell, so it costs gold to even have on your caster. It's really not worth it. I would never recommend this spell ever. Ever. Like ever. Any complaints about that, Necroac?
You deal in a lot of absolutes, but other than that...
Yeah, other than that. A Sith deals in absolutes, so... What is the next one? Death?
We could do the replay for Life and Fire.
Oh, we have a replay for Life and Fire, that'll be good then. Use that one.
Then we can take a break from hearing you drone on for a bit.
Sounds good. Well, this is a simple replay. I was expecting a full battle. But just a test of unity. Okay.
Yeah, it's just tests.
Fair enough. Lycus bringing the Lifecaster Lord for the High Elves, and Necrotic bringing Flamecaster of the Warriors of Chaos, along with a bunch of units, so we can have a look at how the spells affect each other, and how they can sway combat and such.
For this one, we mostly showcase only the direct damage. We cast the buffs, but the units weren't fighting, just to show that they do something. But
You do choose something, yeah.
buffs are all independently chosen, or like situational.
Yeah, situational, depending on... Whereas direct damage is always constant, more or less. Yeah. Going through stuff, this is mostly a test, so I'll have a look at how the spells are cast.
The first spell starts at a minute in.
A minute in, yeah. Can't see it because the Lord is under attack symbol going off, but there you can see the amount of damage taken from a fireball cast. Was that an overcast or a simple fireball?
All these are simple cast.
Simple cast. So about 600 damage, 645 damage dealt on a direct hit from the fireball. Shows you about how much damage it does. And then you can take that into account how much health is like in a model, in a monstrous infantry or an artillery unit, and you can work out whether a fireball can just instantly kill a model or not. Because that is what you want to generally be doing, is killing models, so that they can't heal or regenerate. Particularly good on lords and stuff like this. As you can see from that damage.
Next, I believe, is a Burning Head.
Burning Head. So this is, of course, the noob line of death. The exact reason, the exact thing you don't want to happen, unless you're the one casting the Burning Head. Spearman, 40 infantry, 40 armor.
Watch it curve away out the line here.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, curving out. So you definitely saw how the cast was lined up directly like this, but Burning Head, as you can see, it swerves off in certain directions. Usually it goes like this, or like this. It doesn't usually stray like all over the place. It just tends to curve slightly towards the end.
You'll usually get at least one unit full straight,
Yeah.
and then after that it'll start turning.
Just don't give it too much of a run up, and you should be fine. But you can see there, 40 armor Spearman, completely wiped out. Unit completely wiped out when all of its models were hit. 40 armor is probably the ideal. I think it's probably the ideal amount of armor you want to be casting a Burning Head on. Anything higher than that, and it starts to get a bit reduced, and you're not killing as many models. A Piercing Bolt coming down on the Rangers.
Same thing. This is just a regular cast.
Yep, regular cast coming down.
The only thing on this unit is it's a pretty spaced out unit.
Yeah, pretty spaced out unit, but you can see it's killed everything that it was on there. So if you put Piercing Bolts onto a blobbed up unit, like a lot of units that are really tight together, it will kill basically everything in that area.
Especially like an example for Chaos would be if you had Archaon and he's in there fighting, and you have the infantry blob up around him, that'll wipe out quite a bit of units.
Yeah.
I believe coming up next would be a Flame Storm.
Flamestorm coming down, yeah. Flamestorm, of course, doesn't care as much about armor, but all these units are about low armor as well. so it's not going to be...
We just had a healing cast on the Lord.
Oh yeah, hidden cast on the Lord.
On the other Lord.
This one.
No, it was just I was using the Book of Hoth
No, Book
to
of Hoth.
regenerate. No, not.
Correct.
Welcome, Marcus.
Also,
You can fast forward.
Oh, here you go. Here comes the Flamestorm. Now, typically, vortexes usually travel away from the caster. That tends to be the pattern they follow.
This was entirely a misclick.
Yeah.
So on this one, I believe we do another one later on.
You can see the units that the models that it is hitting is doing a really amount of damage to. A lot of them are dying. Some of them are getting back up again, but it's doing a fair amount of damage. But there is a general theme with all vortex spells is that you usually travel away from the caster. They might turn back around at the end, but to start with, they'll always usually move away from the caster. Which is a good thing to keep in mind about where your caster is positioned and where like you're firing the vortex at. And what direction you want to go. You can sort of control it a little bit.
I think you can speed up now to up 6 minutes because we're pretty much out of magic, and then we're gonna cast Cascading Fire Cloak.
6 minutes cascading fire cloak, and then at 7 we start into the life magic.
Yeah. Because as you can all imagine, like casting all that magic takes
And it takes a lot of
really quick. And
gotta
We
have
also
rest.
Didn't have a bunch of mana batteries in here when we should have. Here's
Alright,
the
here you go,
cascading
6
cloak
minutes.
right up here. It's gonna cast on those chaos.
These
Warriors.
Chaos Warriors here. So you can see right now they're setting at 44 melee defense. Oh, there's another Flamestorm coming down there. Didn't see that one cast. But again, you can see it moving away from the caster, generally. Good damage on those units. It basically does the damage of a burning head, I think. But it speeds around a lot more and it has armor piercing.
Good spell if you can get it to work.
It's also really nice to look at. For those arsonists out there.
I mean, I do like a good fight.
You do like a good Flamestorm, a fire tornado.
I believe
It's
it
been 7 minutes that the fire cloak comes down, I'm assuming.
I think it cast during the flamestorm as well.
Did it? Oh, there you go. We can see Awakening of the Woods. Yeah, like not very much damage there. But those are Mordor Horse Masters, so they have like 50 armor. They're also very spaced out. You're mostly using that old ability for the speed debuff.
Like I said, it's speed debuff, and it's also good if you get your hero caught. You can kind of blow a path out.
Yeah, similar to like Verminous Valor, that sort of thing.
Now we're directly into life magic, so I'd focus in on that life caster there.
Just gonna see where he's casting. Oh, here we go. Awakening of the Woods.
No,
So-
Dwellers Below.
Dwellers Below even. So that was an overcast as well. You see the overcast effect being hit there. Took about 4 seconds to charge up. Still going. Considering these Forsaken could have moved out a long time ago, and it's going to do about half their health. Yeah, about half their health. 17 wins of magic for that isn't particularly
Forsaken
worth
are
it.
not an expensive unit.
No.
It's-
I don't think she would have got her value back there as a caster. No, 460 damage value for 17 wins of magic is really not worth it. When you consider how much the Flaming Skull got in terms of value,
But your
about
life caster is
1,700?
not about value.
No.
That is the one thing they're
it
not
should be
about.
noted that Awakening Dwellers Below is just a really odd spell in the lore of life. It should really just be deleted.
By the way, there's Flesh to Stone
Oh,
on
well.
the Spearmen in the back.
Yeah, you can see the armor increased to 100, which is a lot of armor. That's the same amount of armor as Chaos Warriors, which can definitely help a lot in combat.
A thing about Dwellers Below is it will only increase the speed debuff. If you
Overcast,
overcast it,
yeah, that
so
all
it
it
was
does.
really not worth it.
Really not worth it.
And Flesh to Stone, it will around double the duration
Duration, yeah.
if you overcast it, and it only costs like 10 wins of magic. So 88 seconds, those spearmen would have had 100 armor.
hmm
So that's probably worth it.
Probably. If you're not considering Earthbloods exist.
Yeah. If you would not have Earthblood and Regrowth in that lore, you would maybe use that spell.
Yeah. When's the next one happening? Oh, there it goes.
But if you have insane Winds of Magic regeneration, maybe.
There's your
Yeah, that's
four.
enough.
So yeah, so that's the 4 damage units getting Earthblood. That's Chamber doesn't show healing done because that would have been a lot of value. That is over 1,000 healing done. Even though they're infantry, so they're not getting any models resurrected. And especially with the fact that most of the models were dead. But it still did a good chunk of healing.
Thorns is gonna be cast
least
in
1,000.
second.
Yeah, Shield of Thorns coming out. Shield of Thorns, of course, also really works well because these rangers already have 20% physical resistance. So buffing that up to 42, that's about half the damage they take from sources. And their weapon strength as well goes up to 41.
And they got a nice
It was
buff on
only
their
30. It was only like 28 before, up to 41 now. Oh, because that was an
that's only
overcasted
due to
one.
The overcast.
Yeah,
Gives you
overcast.
60% additional weapon, the base weapon damage.
Over
no,
here,
no AP though.
Flaming Sword of Ruin increases Forsaken, known to have quite a bit of weapon strength, so they're quite a good target for this because it multiplies it. So 81 now. That is a lot for infantry. 81 weapon strength is really high for infantry models. It also, of course, gets the flaming and magical attacks on their melee attacks as well. It also does also imbue those into its ranged attacks as well. Should be noted. So if you want to use it on ranged units, it will sort of still apply the magic damage and fire damage as well. I think that's right. Pretty sure that's right. 100% sure that's right.
Yep. Also applies it to artillery.
Yeah. Any sort of
Okay.
missile or melee attacks.
You can forward it around to 14, 15, 45. That's when we need to collect magic.
Thank you for sacrificing your time in this
I
endeavor.
believe the next ones we.
Yeah, also,
we took
what we're
unit
going
counts
to
off.
show off at the moment, why I'm running my caster around like a maniac, is I want to tire her out because
Oh, yeah.
Reaper has an additional fact that
Meanwhile, you just throw an dragon breath onto those poor spearmen.
yeah,
I got
he's
bored,
also in a
that's
second. He's
useless.
also gonna charge. The he basically immediately dies, and I
Nearly.
yell at him. What you imagine is me yelling at Necrotic to actually get out because like he took over a quarter of your health. In one
Yeah.
hit.
You can see casters don't usually have that much health, so overcasting is especially dangerous. But here we go, a heal activated. Instantly brings her back up to fresh as well. That vigor doesn't happen over time, that instantly happens. And also the healing is massive. For single entities, there is really no better healing spell than Regrowth.
Wasn't I think even overcasted, so it goes up to like
Yeah.
2k HP healed if you overcast it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have fully healed her in an overcast.
I mean, I think he's going to fully heal with a basic cast, is that right? Yeah, there goes.
Pretty much, yeah.
Just about.
Yeah, there's Law of Fire and Law of Life in action.
So what are you gonna say? Like, where would you use both laws, or did you already talk about this? Sorry if you did.
And we didn't actually, I'll go back to the spell screen so you can talk about this. We didn't really, that's the wrong screen.
Because what I get like from Law of Life, you would probably only use it like every time you have expensive shit, or even if you have just access to it. Like,
Law of Fire or Law of Life? Law of Life.
Lore of Life, I find you bring quite often when you have pretty much every faction that has Lore of Life. You're usually bringing in some expensive units.
Yeah, if you're bringing those
Draconia,
expensive
you're
units.
going to bring it to buff the cav.
Yeah.
If you're Empire, you're bringing it to heal.
Heal
cav
funds,
or
basically.
Entities. Yeah.
Yeah.
High elves, you could bring fucking strong units, or you're bringing single entities. Like, if you have access to it, usually you'd end up bringing it.
Yeah, life is, you do sort of need to build around life. You can't just sort of throw it in right at the end. You need to consider that everything you have something worth healing. You're not going to go full mass infantry rush and bring life. Typically, you want to make sure you've got something worth healing, like a single entity, or just something with a really big health pool that's got low models, more or less.
Yeah.
You aren't usually bringing life outside of that. Fire, on the other hand, is pretty much a bring whenever, more or less.
I bring as much as possible, because I prefer the Lore of Fire.
Yeah, I think you can bring, like, nearly all the time.
Yeah, you could pretty much bring it with every build, with a few exceptions for certain army builds, but
Yeah, I think maybe against dwarves you wouldn't bring it against. But besides that, there's not really any faction that you don't want to
Well-
bring fire against.
the theme of fire is basically
Actually-
kills chaff units really,
Yeah.
really.
And can do really good damage to just all infantry in general.
like piercing bolts of fire plus the 2 buff spells are fine as well if you
Mhm.
really wanted to bring fire and didn't want to bring anything else.
Yeah. Burning Head is
Because-
an amazing chaff clearer against, like, Skaven, Undead,
Your unit
anything with chaff infantry.
against dwarves using piercing bolts of fire, they're too slow to run away, so
Hmm.
they can actually die from it.
But it does
It
have
does-
the reduced damage in some cases.
Yeah, but it does so much damage that it kills the infantry outright.
And you don't have to build around it, is one of the big things. Like,
Yeah.
you can just bring
Fire-
your army to increase
You aren't
damage.
building around fire, you just
No.
you get fire, you throw at enemy.
Yeah, you throw it in. When you've got a law and you think, I've got my build and now I'm going to make my law, you just throw fire in. When you don't want to think about magic synergy, you can usually just throw fire in. And then look at your fire spells and think, okay, I don't have any magic damage, I should probably bring Flaming Sword of Ruin. Or I don't really have any good single entity sniping, I should probably bring a Fireball. Or I really want to deal with masses of infantry, I'll bring Burning Head or
Or-
Flamestorm.
Or I'm a afraid that I'm gonna get Lord sniped. Bring Cascading Flame.
Yeah, Cascading Flame Cloak's probably, Fire Cloak's probably always worth bringing. I mean, 24 melee defense for 4 mana Winds of Magic is pretty much always worth it on a unit.
Plus 25% armor piercing.
Yeah, which has an effect if you've got the armor piercing values for it.
Always
Which-
bring
which-
Flaming Sword if there's any chance there's an ethereal unit on the field.
Or if you've got any chance of
Advice.
fighting something with physical resistance, even.
Physical resistance, but the big one's ethereal.
Yeah,
So a lot
obviously,
of
yeah.
factions don't have anything to do
Actually,
with it.
one thing I'd have fun doing is using Cascading Cloak Flame. Shit.
Cascading Fire
Fire
Cloak.
Cloak.
Yeah.
On something like even like Marauders with great weapons, or just great weapons in general, because it does actually increase their damage quite a bit,
Mhm.
and well,
And it'll nearly
something
double
like
their melee
me.
defense as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely does have quite effect, especially on those lower tier infantry that have like lower melee defense. It's gonna like buff it and double it entirely. So yeah, Law of Fire, something you don't usually build around, whereas Law of Life you definitely need to take more into consideration when you're building your army. Next we can do, what is it, Beast, Death and Dark that we have to do?
Let's do Death and High as the next.
Oh, Death and Actually no, Dark and High would make sense, wouldn't it? They got Dark Elves and High Elves.
Yes, but
There you go.
No, as a replay.
Oh, is it? Oh, you did it wrong. Okay, fine. Death and High we're going to do. So, starting off with Death. Glorious Death Magic. Who doesn't love Death Magic? It's purple, it's spooky, who doesn't love it?
Not me.
I love
because
it.
I had to put up with having to play against Death Magic in the first game, where herder, I get you Spirit Leech on your Lord, and they die in 2 casts.
So I was talking about
Uh,
Aspect of the Dread Knight, 4 Winds of Magic. Typically you'll notice a theme whereas the cheapest ones are on the left. That is usually how it goes in terms of Winds of Magic and cost. Aspect of the Dread Knight is a buff augment that you can apply to one target. If you overcast it, it does an area of effect instead and it lasts longer. 16 seconds is its base, 32 seconds is overcast, and it also affects allies in range. About the same range. I think most AoE augments have about the same range of 200 meters, or 40 meters even. I don't think that they tend to always be about the same range in terms of things. Its effects is it gives 8 leadership and can cause terror. It should also be noted that when it causes terror, it also becomes immune to terror, which you can use as just a pure leadership buff in most fronts.
Or in some cases, you can use it on like a Shock Calf, and that doesn't have terror.
And then
cause-
applies terror, and then you can instant terror out Alpha Archers and all sort of things.
Archers, or even frontline units too.
Or even if you're really into the game, this could come in clutch. If you're like really down to like 2 units that are low morale, if yours has not only 8 extra leadership but also causes terror when it previously didn't, that could win you the game in certain situations. I think for Winter Magic, you're basically bringing this most of the time. I'd say only against like maybe when you're fighting the undead, you wouldn't bring it.
Because
Yeah.
If the terror doesn't do anything,
useless.
or if you're fighting,
Fighting a unit that has a ton of terror.
or dwarves,
There's no point.
where dwarves are like completely immune to psychology more or less. Probably not worth
Yeah.
against dwarves.
Yeah, all their Longbeards are immune to psychology, which is
And even the dwarf warriors have so much leadership that the terror won't hit them.
it won't matter.
Yeah. So I think typically worth it because how cheap it is and how it can just be there for the last minute if you need it. It's always worth bringing. Spirit Leech, really good spell. Used, I take all the time. It's a direct damage spell.
Purple
Ooh,
Beetle
actually.
Womp.
Yeah. 13-second duration is how long it takes to do its damage over time. I don't know. I'm sure we'll see it in the replay. I can't remember exactly how much damage it does. I think it's about 500.
I
Wanna say?
think they had, beforehand it used to be a percentage, which was really stupid.
Yeah,
It
that was
would be
used to
like-
scale to percentage,
It
which
was,
was
it was
insane.
always it was always I think 50% of the current health of the unit.
Which
So
is
after
there's a
2
reason that was
casts, they'd
nerfed
be
but that way.
down to like a quarter of their health left.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, great. So 2 casts would pretty much effectively allow you to snipe a lord easily.
Yeah.
Why it was so cancer, but now it's I think just a flat amount of around I think either
500 or so. It's somewhere in the,
yeah
that sort of
it's
range. We'll have a look
I'd
in the
say
replay, I'm sure. We'll see.
300 to 600 is where its damage range is.
It should be noted
Because I
that
wouldn't-
yeah, it does
I
scale
wouldn't-
depending
I
on how
wouldn't say
many
it's 500
models there are.
because Fireball doesn't even do 500.
Yeah, no, it must be about
damage
400.
and actually can miss.
500.
Because
But it
that-
has a much shorter range, Spirit Leech, as well, unless you overcast it.
Well, actually, Fireball has not that far a range either. Like, I think Fireball has
300.
what?
300 meters.
300 meter range.
Yeah.
But Spirit Leech is basically the opposite of Regrowth in terms of it's the offensive version of regrowth, whereas regrowth you want to be in the healing on the single entities. Spirit Leech kills the single entities. It doesn't really do an awful lot to infantry. You typically only want to be using this on anything with models fewer than 50. Anything more than 50, you're not probably going to get your value out of it. 8 Winds of Magic is a fairly cheap costed spell, so you can usually spam these out quite a bit. Overcasting it only increases the cast range, which can come in handy because the Spirit Reach effect can also hit artillery models. So if you want to get rid of the enemy artillery early in the game, an overcast Spirit Leech will usually kill at least a cannon, if not 2. If you're lucky, I think if it kills 2, but most of the time it just kills 1 cannon. But even then, that's 1 fewer cannon that's shooting you at the start of the game.
And if you're absolutely desperate to get rid of certain units of cav, you can pop it on cavalry or monstrous infantry.
Yeah.
Anything that has
The low models.
especially if it's below like 40 models or something.
Mhm.
Spirit Leech actually can do okay damage to
Yeah.
them. It won't do a lot, but it'll do something.
But for its cost of, you can spam it out for 8 Winds of Magic. It definitely does build up over time. Next,
Also,
Doom and Darkness. Again, you're seeing that spookiness. This one is a hex, our first hex at the time. So this means it targets onto an enemy unit. It can only affect one unit at a time, unless I think it's overcasted. It gets an area of effect. Lasts 36 seconds, and it reduces leadership by 16. 16 is quite a bit of leadership. Yeah, 16 is quite a bit of leadership to affect. I don't forget how much terror is. I think terror is 20.
Terror is a percentage.
It's a threshold. I think when it reaches a certain amount, it just drops.
It's
Then
not
to
Fear
get
is
terror.
10.
No, fear is 10.
No, fear.
No, fear is 8, isn't it?
No, fear is a -10, a flat -10.
Yeah.
Terror is you have to be brought down to I think 20% of your leadership.
Yeah, which definitely just does have that use in. Doom and Darkness can help bring those high leadership units down to that threshold where they can get terror damage.
Terror is chance based, so you need to be like between 20 and 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's around 20 to 30%, and then it rolls every about.
No, not percent. Just you need to be reduced to 20 and 30 leadership around that.
Really?
Yeah, I don't
It's
think
not chance based because otherwise you wouldn't terror out wolf rats, for example, unless they're like under 6 leadership.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just a flat leadership bonus.
Yeah, but Doom and Darkness does help reach to those terror margins, which is main use comes in, is where you want to be routing off a unit. If you want to get it to terror threshold, then you pop this, and then you can chase it off with something else. If you just don't want to deal with the unit, just break it and chase it off. Overcasting it gives the area of effect.
It does AoE.
Yeah, which means it affects all your enemies in range. Depending on how clumped up the enemy is, this could help really take apart like box formations and stuff like that.
Or
really tight
break the
formations.
Front line.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a bunch of terror monsters that are just slamming into the front, because yeah, they'll die pretty fast with spears, but the spears, if they crack under the terror, then you win.
Mhm. But it should be noted it's got fairly specific circumstances in where you want to be breaking a unit and not really killing it so much as you just want to break it and run it off.
Yeah.
Which, it does have its specific circumstances. It should also be noted that this is pretty much useless against undead.
It is useless against
Even
undead.
dwarves won't suffer much from this. 16 leadership isn't enough probably to break them, especially seeing as most of them are already immune to psychology. The only thing you'd be casting this on is like dwarf warriors, which isn't worth it.
Or a long beard when their morale is actually low enough to cause a rout.
But even then you can't terror at them because you're immune to psychology, so...
No, I mean just regular routing.
Yeah, routing. But even then you probably have to wait for them to get to like 20 models left before they run away from that.
Exactly.
Or just hold out for way too long.
Yeah.
A good target for this spell actually is like single entity models, because normally they don't have the best leadership, and if you can then surround them, for example, the cheap monsters from the Lizardmen,
Yeah, like feral
or
carnosaurs.
you can
Doesn't a
actually
Carnosaur
like
only have,
route, or
54?
not terror out because they're immune to terror, but you can actually route them and then chase them off,
Yeah, with just a cheap
even on
modular unit.
really high HP. So it's like just a little bit of tactic there.
Or you can just instantly route trolls if you want to. If you want,
Yeah.
would that be funny?
Pretty much.
Yeah. If you want to watch an orc player cry.
Or just any troll player. Or anybody who's dumb enough to bring trolls gets routed. Moving on to another hex.
Without a black orc.
Soul Blight. Area effect. This one's always area effect, not just with the overcast. Overcasting just affects duration. For 8 Winds of Magic, it's reducing the armor and the damage output of the units affected.
Which is really...
Yeah, it's pretty good. 30 armor, that's Plague of Rust. And that's an AoE Plague of Rust for 8 Winds of Magic. can be really helpful in some engagements. Considering it's the only really like fully combat supportive spell in a death magic, you can just throw this onto the front line whenever.
Yep.
And it will always help you out in the situation. It will reduce enemy armor so you do more damage, and it will reduce the amount of damage they do to you at the same time. So it can work out pretty well. It runs for 25 seconds, overcasting it lands for 50. You just sort of have to gauge how long you think the combat's going to be lasting for, and then determine which one you want to throw onto there. But overall, I'd say just don't think too much about it and throw the regular on. Don't risk the miscast chance. Especially because most casters of Death Law tend to be pretty important figures in your army, usually your general. Thinking like Arcan, Manfred, usually important people you don't want to be taking miscast chance damage. So, typically,
Well,
just
don't
leave
they
it with
also have regeneration of one way or another?
that. Arcan does. That doesn't even.
Well,
But,
you got the
Manfred would.
natural like healing from the
Tomb King ability.
King shit,
Hmm.
right? So you can get away with maybe 1 or 2 overcasts
Hmm.
with them, but
Again,
that
though,
would
it's like your lord. If it was on a caster, like if it's on just like your side caster, you
Oh,
definitely don't care at all. But when it's on your lord, it's a bit of playing with fire, quite a bit. Overcasting it, like I said, just increases the duration up to 50 seconds, which is quite a long time. That's pretty much the length of the front line fight most of the time.
yeah. But with Manfred, definitely, he's got regeneration, especially
Mhm.
if you have on like a Terrorgeist or something.
Yeah, Soul Blight is probably a spell almost always worth taking. It's never, even if you just have it there, it's probably worth
Yeah.
it just to have there, whenever you
Like,
want to be buffing up the
if
front line.
You want to have 2 spells that you know you will use
Mhm.
and will be useful in one way or another. Is Spirit Leech and Soul Blight.
Yeah.
Those are your 2 main death
Those
spells
two will always come in handy.
against any faction.
Yeah, and even if you just bring those two, you just want to be making sure you use up as much winter magic as you can. The idea is you want to make full use of your caster before either he dies or you win, or lose.
Yeah. You'll either die trying to Spirit Leech
Mhm.
the other guy, or
Live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
live long enough to use Soul Blight.
Yeah. Because when you're dealing with casters, you are basically getting access to a resource, and so you want to make full use of that resource for the amount of money that you're paying. You want to use all of it up as quickly as, well, not as quickly as possible. You want to use it up before you run out of access to it.
Or, have it die.
Yeah, so you run out of access. Next, a vortex spell, Purple Sun of Zurius.
I just call it
I just call it. Everyone just calls it
Xerxes.
Purple Sun because nobody can pronounce that one. That's last one.
No, I just call it Xerxes.
A pretty
Yeah, I say Xerxes as well. Yeah.
a pretty expensive, short-lasting vortex, but it does do a huge amount of damage, and it also has a really strong pull effect in, where it will pull infantry into its core
like
and then do more damage to it.
Mobile Pit of Shades when
Yeah.
Pit of Shades wasn't garbage.
Very powerful, but not as long-lasting. So typically, you want to put this directly on top of the expensive unit you want to be hitting, because chances are it won't reach anything else. It'll probably just hit only the unit that you've put it on.
You will see in game once we end the screen. You will see what it does. Like,
Yeah,
well,
but
it's-
good against armor. It does. If it's infantry, even against like cavalry, it'll do a really good amount of damage. As long as it gets caught up in it, it can do a really good amount of damage for 18 winds of magic.
It's still
Overcasting
an
it.
insane amount of infestation for 18 winds of magic or
Mhm.
24.
Overcasting it makes it last longer. That's it. Which can be helpful, but again, when you're increasing the duration of vortexes, you really are just rolling the dice even more to make sure it goes in the exact direction you want it to. Because if it just spirals off, you're just wasting the overcast, which is like another 6 winds of magic, and you're risking damage to your caster. Which can be quite risky to pull off. But overall, I'd say Purple Sun is basically worth it if you're expecting armoured infantry. If you're expecting expensive infantry that you can just plop this on and guarantee you're probably going to get your value back quite quickly, it should be fine. Because if you drop this on like a Chaos Warrior unit, as soon as it spawns in, you'll probably have made the 200 gold that it's worth back.
Yeah.
So, if you're expecting those armoured infantries or those type formations of infantry, I'd have to say bring this. Fate of Buna.
Is a weird spell.
It's a really expensive spell.
It's
22
very
winds of magic is a lot.
All it does is legit delete any infantry, any like multi-model unit
Mhm.
from full to nothing,
Mhm.
and there's dick all you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's a nice unit chosen you've got there.
Mind if
Yeah.
I delete it?
Yeah. Oh, those are nice Crimson Killers you got there. Shame if
Mhm.
something happened to it. Especially, it really hurts factions that don't have any healing available. Because
It will just delete it and there'll be no recovering.
there's no recovering, and you could lose well over 1,000 gold. Like, and you only need to use it once, and then you could just use Spirit Leech for the rest of the game or something, or Soul Blight.
Mhm.
Like, you brought Buna plus the other Spirit Leech or Soul Blight, you could probably get away with just popping it on a super elite unit, and then just using the other 2 spells for the rest of it.
The only problem that's with it is that it does have that situational list of you need to rely that your enemy is bringing that elite unit, like that
Yeah.
chosen or that black. Because if you use it on basically anything else, it's probably not worth it. 22 Winds of Magic is an obscene amount of magic.
Yeah, it can take out, I think, because the less models you have, I think the less it does, I think?
Yeah,
I'm not
it doesn't.
sure.
No, I think it's a flat
Because-
cap to each model. It takes a certain amount of damage, I think. And so if
Yeah,
there's
like,
fewer
because
models that have bigger health pools, it won't do as much.
I know, like, Hippogriffs, it actually can bring them down to, like, a third of their health, so
Yeah, because it does a lot of damage per model.
it still does a lot of damage, even Cavalry. Like, it's like, oh, that's a
Hmm.
nice, Grail Guardians you got there. Be ashamed of something. Oh, wait, you're healing them.
Yeah.
But, granted, though, like, you could use it and then just keep pressure on it with, like, arrows or something, and to kill them that way, because, well, when their health is low enough, you could just kill them with one shot.
Yeah, but when it comes to like elite units that are lower in entity, like Hippogriff Knights, like I said, I think you probably get more damage out of just 2 Spirit Leeches than you would out of a full fit of Buna.
Yeah.
Which then you just comes into that situational list of when you need it or not. Typically, the 3 spells that always have a situation: Spirit Leech, Soul Blight are the big 2, and then Purple Sun most of the time. The other 3 tend to be quite situational in their usage.
Yeah, and you're pretty much predicting someone is going to either bring something or you're playing against a certain faction.
Mm-hmm. Character-specific abilities. This doesn't look like the Law of Death. Why is this here? This is just Law of Metal here. You just put Law of Metal here.
I don't know.
Why is this here?
Could be the character they're using in the demonstration. Oh, that's Berthas or Gel.
No, that's a
Yeah,
guild.
why is the...
Don't question it.
No
Just let's
idea.
get to the next one.
I
We're an
don't
hour
know,
in
We
already.
can
because,
jump into the replay for first and actually see
we need to
this.
do high. We need to do high as well.
Yeah, it's probably more interesting to like see it in game.
Then let's quick it up a bit then.
High magic. First
It's
spell.
a buff.
Yeah, buff. Hand of Glory.
More melee attack and you reload faster. If
Yeah.
you really want it to be a pain in the ass.
Mm,
and
put it
be a
on
Death
some-
Star,
Yeah,
you
so
get, like 7 archery units and it's like, alright boys, let's burn through our ammo as fast as possible.
fast as humanly possible. It's again, you're looking at like if you can compare this to Cascading Fire Cloak, 4 Winds of Magic again, but it's doing the opposite effect. It's giving melee attack instead of melee
attack.
defense.
And reload speed.
Yeah. So if you've got like spearman units that are like already really high in the melee defense, and then you give them this melee attack, it can make them actually chew through infantry pretty quickly. Or it'll increase their damage output even more against large units. Lasts 29 seconds, which I think is longer than Cascading Fire Cloak, which only lasts 19 seconds. So
Yeah.
you're getting more, you're expecting to get more of that melee attack. It's important that you're fighting something
Yeah.
that you want to get that value of the melee attack or the reload skill out of.
Which, given a lot of the high elf units tend not to have a lot of melee attack to
Hmm.
begin with.
Can be a pretty good thing to pop on.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and when you overcast
Overcasting it just affects
speed.
reload speed by an extra 40, which is 3. No, actually, it's
That
extra 20.
That's kind of gross.
Yeah, real quick reload speed. I don't know I can't remember the exact numbers when it comes to reload skill, but it does mean it's going to reload a lot faster. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Reload's
Apotheosis.
super fast.
A 5
It's a heal.
where Winds of Magic, single target heal. That also can make things cause fear, but that's really negligible.
Overcast just increases the range
Well,
of casting.
minus. Let's
Yeah,
be
just
fair,
increase cast
minus
range.
10 leadership is still pretty good.
Yeah, but typically most things either cause fear or are immune to psychology.
The
Yeah,
only
yeah.
unit you would probably cast this on is maybe a Dragon Prince unit that
Mhm.
would actually be not be causing fear
That
itself.
wouldn't be
because
causing fear in the
like,
first place.
if you're using it on anything that is not a single entity, you're pretty much probably...
Yeah, again, because it's a regeneration thing, not a resurrection spell. So it's not going to resurrect models, it's only going to regenerate the models alive at the time.
Yeah.
And for 5 Winds of Magic, when you compare it to like Earthblood, that's 6 event, which that can affect up to 4 units, this only affects 1 at a time. just a worse Earthblood. And overcasting just increases the cast range.
Next is Soul Quench.
Soul Quench, magic missile with a bit more sort of explosion, as opposed to single target. Although it does do still a fair amount of damage on single entities. It has more of a powerful explosion, I think, than Fireball does.
Yeah, definitely.
Long
I know
range.
Fireball has its own explosion. Even if it's overcasted, the explosion is larger, but it's not that big.
Hmm.
As we can see in the thing, where it just takes a giant chunk out of the unit.
Yeah.
It
So
looks like a bigger missile, actually.
don't know how
So-
missile size effects too much, but yeah.
Overcasting pretty much doubles damage and increases your explosion radius as well.
And radius as well, to the explosion radius, does it? Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good against almost all things. I mean, typically you won't be using this against like cavalry, but against single entities, if you have to, against artillery, I think it works especially well. If you can get a good angle on artillery, you can either kill the artillery piece or kill the entire crew.
I believe not many people have access to high either. So
No.
just
Yeah, they
high
don't.
elves,
Just
isn't it?
No, listen, man.
It's just
Get one as
people.
well? Pretty sure Lizardman get it as well. I know Mazamundi has
No.
Apotheosis.
Well, he has Apotheosis, but I don't think he has this spell.
No, yeah, this is mostly unique to high. Some of these spells are sort of spread out, like Tempest you see all over the place. Apotheosis you see around, but I think most of it's unique to high elves, yeah.
Yeah,
Speaking of which, Tempest.
but it looks like you could take out like a third of an infantry unit with that spell.
Yeah, Soul Quench hits pretty big. Tempest. Pretty... The very definition of a situational spell.
So situational.
Yeah, some of the time it does nothing. Some of the time you could completely swing the game in your favour with just one spell. It does a very large amount of damage. It doesn't... I actually miss this sometimes because you're so focused on the speed, you think it's just a speed decrease. But it does a lot of damage to a flying unit.
It does okay damage to a flying unit.
For a spell that's this cheap, it does more than
doesn't
Spirit
like
Leech.
half its health. Like it'll take out half its health in one.
I think it
cast.
does about... I want to say 800 HP.
I've seen
per
it do
entity.
a lot of damage.
It doesn't look like it does a lot of damage normally because it's usually a big dragon with a lot of HP that doesn't
Oh,
really get hit by as much, but it still does a lot of damage. And when it's only 8 winds of magic, it also reduces their speed, which makes them really good targets for missile fire. It's also an AoE effect, so you can hit multiple units at once with it, and it's not like the damage is split between them. If the enemy has flying units, this will get its value back, unless they're like harpies or bats. But like things against like vampire counts. If you're worried about Luther Harkin from the Vampire Coast, Britonia, anything that has those like flying lords or just any annoying flying units. Karl Franz, Boris Todbringer on the Griffins, Malekith on his dragon. Those flying units that you really want to kill. Put this down. You tie them down. It's basically a net, and it does a lot of damage. You can really snipe flying units really easily with this. Overcasting it makes it last longer, which does also increase the damage by double as well. So, and seeing as it's basically a net, so they're basically forced to take that damage. There's no way they can really get out of it except from if they're able to land on a unit that's beneath them. This is a lot of damage. For 12 winds of magic, I think it does more. It definitely does more than 1,000 HP,
yeah.
which is a lot. Probably one of the most damaging spells to entities in the game. But only good against flying units. So make sure your enemy is going to bring a flying unit most of the time. Bit of a
Next
gamble.
up, Fiery Convocation.
It's a wind spell. Does
Very
imagine
slow.
imagine a burning head. It does way more damage to armor, but it has such a charge up time that it's impossible for your opponent to not see it coming.
10 whole seconds.
It has a huge wind up time,
Yeah.
and
that's about it on it.
Yeah. It just takes too long. The overcast just increases the damage, which sure is nice if they stand still,
time-
but that's
The
it.
only time I've seen it like be landable is when someone pops a net to make it
Yeah,
landable.
they used to use a net. Like if
But
you
at
try and
that
use this on the
point-
front line, you can just move your units back and watch as how it runs into their own units.
Yeah, because here's
It's
the
this is
thing,
not good.
Like, if you want to use Fiery Convocation, just use Veda Buna. It simply does it better.
I'll just bring Burning Head if you were
That
looking for
too.
that wind spell. That's literally it.
If
Not
you
very
want-
good.
If you wanted an armor piercing spell that could kill an infantry unit super easy, just
Bring-
bring Veda Buna.
Yeah,
maybe.
or
That would
anything else.
actually be more valuable.
Arcade and Forging.
Direct damage, single target.
It's Spirit Leech, but for high magic.
Yeah, Spirit
Yeah.
Leech does more. I think it does a little bit more damage than Spirit Leech.
Resets their ability.
Yeah,
recharge.
it also resets their ability recharge. But again, it's only for those single entities. It has a short cast range. I think overcasting it. What does that mean?
It just increases the ability recharge rate for.
So it
45.
recharges a lot quicker, does it?
No, it recharges longer.
No,
It makes the ability
makes
to
all
recharge
your abilities count for the next 45 seconds.
I see, yeah, at the bottom there. It says opposed to the 30 seconds, an extra 15-second cooldown to the ability. So typically you want to be casting this on the caster. Like if you're up against a hybrid lord like Malekith or something, boom. Like resetting his abilities for 45 seconds. That's a long time, and it does a good chunk of damage as well. Should be. I don't think it does very much. This does very much to artillery, but again, you want to be targeting this on heroes or lords or casters. Casters the best target basically.
All
This
ability, not just spells too.
Yeah, that includes all abilities and spells. So a lot of recharge time and a good chunk of damage.
Let's jump over to the replay for these.
Yeah.
Which one is it? Dark? Wait, no, that's not the right one. That one.
Death and High.
High death.
It's the top one.
Yeah, I got it.
Man, he's got eyes for days.
He's got a lot of eyes growing out his head.
Yeah.
So this one we both just brought mana batteries.
Yeah, I see that the two casters are there for that.
Yeah. And then I think the next one we each brought like 4 mana batteries.
Smart. Hopefully there won't be as much waiting this time.
God, you're so fucking demanding for a guy.
Yeah,
who
yeah.
can
Well, you
play
want to
this
rush through this as quickly as possible. You're the one who's saying, quick, we need to get this done, run out of time.
I'm not trying to rush you, but you're talking about the same goddamn spell all the time.
Which is this? Everqueen's Court.
Everqueen
Why did you bring
because
that?
they have magic resistance. They
Oh.
improve the recharge rate. You don't know that, Willow? Damn it.
Oh.
Yeah, you the ability.
Yeah, that one.
Well, actually.
Here we go.
Spirit
Spirit Leech coming down.
Yeah, Spirit Leech and a lot.
Here we can see this is the single entity, this is the ideal target. And there we can see how much damage it did. About
Did
200.
around 300 damage, not a lot.
About 300, yeah.
Yeah. But if you use it 17 times.
That's a lot of damage.
Yeah.
A Dragon Breath, that ain't high magic. Also, I didn't realise you could put. I forgot you could put Archmages on dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah, but only moon dragons, like the only dragon.
Yeah, yeah, the lowest
With
dragon.
the exception
No, is that a
of
moon dragon?
It's on a moon
fire.
dragon, yeah.
I thought it was a Star Dragon. Sun dragon.
Except the fire guy who can go on a sun dragon.
Yeah. See this
Okay,
flying around a
so
little bit.
in a second you will see Fate of Buna. on the
Fate of Juno and Dragon
Prince.
Princess. 45 models.
This isn't even like. Wait 1 second. Yeah, you see how fast their health is dropping.
Yeah, if you combine this with like a charge from Chaos Knights or like anything,
Any cavalry.
you will see those models drop really quickly. Because if you're done with the spell, you will notice that I think not even one model, like one model died, I think. One Dragon Prince died, so you could probably heal those up for like almost full health
Yeah.
again.
As long as you follow it up, like that's only half the health. But again, it's got only 45 models. So. it
Only
doesn't
lost
use-
one of its models, should be noted. How the damage was split out like that much, so a regrowth on this would be the ideal target.
Yeah.
So Fate of Buna
But
can be
again-
hard countered sometimes by healing
Well,
magic.
Not hard counter.
Not
A
really.
lot of the cases, like if the Chaos Player has like 2 units of throwing axe and or horse masters, you could just throw that at the Dragon Princes and they'll die. 'cause
Die
they're
model
You-
on each actual
You
piece
would
model.
be following it up with something. You wouldn't just
Yeah, do it on its own.
do it and then go away.
Especially if they have healing in the back.
Now the. I was wondering if you're gonna use Fate of Buna on.
You can
Sister.
forward to around 4 minutes, then that's gonna be the next spell. Purple Sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to arrange the unit somewhat so we can actually show off a Vortex.
Go Vortex.
Where's the purple sun?
Yeah, and I think this was actually aimed towards the caster, so you can see it immediately, as opposed to the other ones, it actually run at the direction of the caster. And you see it almost does like no damage.
Yeah, mainly because this is spaced out and this only touched this one a little bit. If you had to plump this on the Phoenix Guard, definitely would have got a lot more value out of it. Poor targeting.
Yeah, but like 11 seconds is not a lot, and I feel like
Even yeah, that's why you drop it on the unit.
Well, yeah. It's
You don't put it
Purple
to the
Sun.
side.
The thing with Purple
It
Sun
was
is
directly
that,
on the Rangers, and it
It was-
almost.
yeah, but it's
like,
Rangers.
yeah, but ranges are spread out, like, and it
Yeah, but-
almost took out half its health by, and let's be real,
Yeah,
as
but we're
it
talking about
flew.
18 winds of magic.
Yeah, but you're not putting it on
Yeah.
Rangers. You put them when they're blobbed
you
up.
don't put on rangers.
Or you put it on like Everqueen's Court even.
Oh,
Next,
Next
yeah,
spell,
in
Soul
10
Blight.
seconds, Soul Blight, but
uh,
Just want to shoot a bit first. For like popping some shots off. Here we go, Sublight. So you can see Rangers typically have 30 armor. Dropping them down to 0 armor. That can definitely help a lot in melee situations. Not to mention that their weapon strength also gets dropped down to 22. Where it's previously 28.
Drop down pretty well as well.
Yeah, can do a pretty good Spearman from 40 to 10. Sublight can always help in those frontline engagements where you need it. Reducing damage and increasing damage taken.
I guess we should speed up to the next.
Wait, something else going on
yeah,
here?
it's
Doom and
5:45.
Darkness.
Doom and Darkness as well. But
Yeah, not much to say about that. Reducing leadership there from 79 to 56.
Aspect of Dread Knight right away as well.
There you go, Aspect of Dread Knight. You can see Terror Cause is applied in the bottom left. Up to 77 leadership from 61. Can help quite a bit. Fiery Convocation coming down. Didn't get to
Also-
see the full charge up time there. You see, even then, it did about like half the damage to those Forsaken. But for the charge up time and the amount of winds of magic it is, it's not typically worth it.
Well, Forsaken are kind of spread out though.
I
Yeah.
mean, it would look better in a frontline engagement, but still, like any opponent that does not dodge this, like you probably have this in the bank anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's already a
It's-
big problem for
it's-
the enemy in
yeah,
the first
the
place.
free spells from Tactless can work, like because he gets this bounce spell, but that's probably the only time you ever want to use this.
Because
Arcane
it doesn't use
and
magic to
Forge.
use
Okay,
fire.
unfortunately going on here. I think he started about 3,400 health.
Yeah, 3,500 health.
500 health.
That's
Yeah,
around
so a lot more damage than
Okay.
the Spirit
There we
Leech
go.
is still going. Still going. Still going. There you go. About 600 damage or so.
like 600 damage or so.
Which for its,
And
in terms of its
that's-
price, probably about the same sort of relative to Spirit Leech.
Yeah,
At 8 minutes, you'll have a Tempest.
8 minutes. So
That poor
that's
lord.
what-
There we go, Tempest going down, so it was 2,800 health. I mean, you see how much damage this thing does. Yeah. Nearly 1,000 damage from one Tempest, and that isn't even an Overcast one, was it?
Yeah,
That
it
was, I think, overcasted.
Was that Overcast one?
Yeah, because it,
That didn't last 22 seconds.
let me
Yeah,
check.
that didn't last 22.
That was 11 seconds. There was no way that was 22 seconds. That was definitely a basic
No, it
one.
wasn't overcast. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
it
was
could have done probably 2,000 damage.
yeah, an Overcast version of that, 2,000 damage, which is probably one of the most damaging spells per model in the game.
You
Yeah.
usually want to follow that up with some archer, like they fly over your army. You follow that up with some
Yeah,
archers.
you want to
Just-
take advantage of that speed debuff, but
Also, just soul quench.
Soul Quench going into there. How much damage that? This magical hasn't been touched, so we can see it's
That
taken
one.
about 500 damage.
Yeah, about that.
Not the best, but like normally.
No,
you
not
use
terrible.
Sniper artillery pieces, I think.
Yeah.
I want to say another Tempest comes down, but next is Apotheosis.
Is that to tell where it's getting it?
We're just regenerating magic for a little
Hmm.
bit here.
Yeah.
My dragon's going to get in his face just for the fun of it.
Point blank dragon breath. Did I hear it? Oh, there it is. So yeah, Apotheosis here being applied to the models. That means it'll get their full usage because they've only lost 3 models.
Yep.
Good amount of healing there. It says on the unit, on the spell how much healing it does, but it's slightly reduced because it didn't hit all of the maximum models. So yeah, 480 hit points restored there.
I can't remember. I think we cast one more thing, but I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, Tempest Day coming down on the medical.
There we go.
Started about 3,300. Oh, the Rampage.
The extended.
Well, see, here it is trying to move out of it. You just see how much its spells affected it by. Oh, this is the extended duration one as well. So even then, as it's constantly moving out, The fact it's overcast just means it lasts even longer. The effect worked out there. Yeah, nearly 2,000 damage there. Huge amount.
Almost 2,000 damage.
I think that's pretty
That's
much
it.
That's it.
There's nothing coming anymore.
So there they are.
Okay, next up we have Lore of Dark. And
I'm just going quickly back to talk about
Yep.
the laws real quick,
just wanna
just where their
check
situation
so
is.
they can just leave if they don't want to.
if you don't care about this.
What?
Okay, where is it? So you're just talking about the two laws real quick. Death is usually something you're tied into, like with Arcan or something. There are probably better laws out there. Usually if you have access to death, you have access to like vampires or anything else. It's not that death is bad. When you have it on, you're definitely not upset that it's on Arcan, that sort of thing. It's just there are better spell laws existing out there, but it is not something you normally need to build around. It is another one of those sort of throw in and do with what if. Some of their spells are a bit more situational, like Fate of Buna. You're not going to be bringing that against Skaven anytime soon.
Yeah, unless
But-
you want it to hurt your expectations of winning.
Yeah, real down. So mostly you can bring it. It's just more about tweaking the spells on which ones you want to bring, which ones you don't want to bring. And as for high magic, it's alright.
Does it?
It's basically just Soul Quench and Tempest you're here for,
Yeah.
more or less. And Tempest is already given to casters that aren't of high magic, like Ariel and
Yeah,
other
Hand of
members.
Glory. Hand of Glory is useful.
Hand of Glory can be useful, yeah, but
Well,
you're not gonna
especially
bring
for high-
Law of High just for Hand of Glory anytime soon.
No, you're not
Maybe
going to bring it just for that.
this
It's
lore,
four,
like
4 wins for 24 melee attack on a faction that doesn't have a lot of melee attack.
yeah, but it's
Mhm.
still like normally where you see high magic is actually with, or like sometimes with Lizardmen, because you combine like 3 Chameleon Skinks with the Tempest and you just nuke enemy flying lords.
Yeah, especially
That too.
Harken.
And Apotheosis, of course, on Master Mundi. If you bring him, you bring
Yeah.
Apotheosis, because then you have a cheap healing spell.
And anyways, Masamudi has just a better version of that, the Hand of Glory called Harmonic Convergence, where it's
Mhm.
24 melee attack and defense.
Yeah, so
I mean-
nothing too stand out. A Tempest is basically the standout player here if you are going against flying things. Hand of Glory, when it comes to Apotheosis, if you want healing, just bring life. If you want any wind spell, just don't bring this one. And Arcane Forging is middling, unless you're hitting it on a caster, specifically.
Like literally bring a barebone Firecast with Burning Head or some shit.
Yeah,
or
instead of bringing Fiery
Shadow with
before you
Mantle.
bring Fiery Convocation, just drop the spell and bare bones a Burning Head. For
Yeah,
like
Barebone
100 extra
Burning
gold,
Head
you're getting
or
it.
Pendulum-
Fine.
Pendulum as well.
Pendulum even, yeah. But yeah,
Those are pretty much the 2 best win spells for reliability.
yeah. We can also see which ones Master Mundi has access to here, with Harmonic Convergence being the... Yeah, because Law of Heavens and Law of Life are sometimes tied together for some reason.
they are.
They always seem to have, like, they tend to have a lot of hybrid casters for those two. But you can see Master Mundi gets Apotheosis and Arcane Forging in his spell pool. Which are the next two then? Is it Death? No, it's Dark and Beasts, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Covering Beasts first, because Beastmen are coming soon, and I want to talk about Beasts, and I want to talk
The
about the law.
Beastie Boys.
What even is it? There it is.
You're
That's
just
metal.
waiting for them to be meta, so you can say you.
Because
played
they're
them
not, they're cool.
Yeah,
I want
Why
waiting for them
play
to be cool.
forever?
I'm waiting for them to be cool.
I'm surprised you
No,
started
you
playing them
mean
already.
you're waiting for them to be broken, so you play them.
Anyway,
first.
Wyson's Wellform. It's again, there it is, that 4 Winds of Magic augment, single target, 22 second duration, 30 armor and 30 base weapon damage. So it's like a little
Like-
Shield of Thorns, but instead of the physical resistance, you're getting half a Flesh to Stone.
You get 30 armor and then 30% more base. I could see this being useful in things like Minotaurs or like a Gorbel.
Yeah, something that's got
Would
low
be-
armor and also isn't AP
Lots
though.
of
You
base
don't want
damage.
something that's like, yeah, lots of base damage. You want.
Yeah, like basic Minotaurs.
They don't.
Base
They still have
Minotaurs.
AP though.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, all monstrous. I don't think there's any monstrous infantry that aren't AP.
No, like Skin Wolves are AP.
Are they monstrous infantry?
Yeah, they're monstrous infantry.
Well, there you go then.
Technically.
But typically, you want to use something that's like low on armor, and well, basically most stuff in the Beastman roster. Like, well, it's not that this is unique to Beast anymore, but it's not It's probably the worst buff single target augment we've bought, but again, it's 4 Winds of Magic and it's really cheap to bring in terms of gold, so there's no reason you really wouldn't bring it.
Yeah.
It's not too much of a investment.
As long as you toss it on something that has less armor than like 30 or 60,
Yeah.
and then has base weapon damage.
Yeah,
not
you
that bad.
you toss it on your swordsman unit in the front line. It wins its engagement against the spearman. It shouldn't have. Yeah.
Actually, technically, if we're talking about Saurus here, though.
Saurus would be pretty good against. Yeah, Saurus is like the
have-
ideal target.
Yeah, Saurus are like perfect because they
Have a lot of
they
base.
have like 40
and
melee,
extra- even more
like
armor.
melee damage, like just raw melee damage. It's like so
Hmm.
that's and 30 of it is about regular base damage. So
Yeah.
you get extra 10 damage from that, and you're
Which is
pushing
definitely
them
worth
up
the
to 90
full Winter
armor.
Magic.
Yeah, that is some good value out of your Saurus.
Overcasting it just it adds an area of effect, which can help a lot more if you've got a large number of units as opposed to singling on a single one.
Yeah.
It does increase the cost to 8, and then of course you have that miscast chance as well.
Granted, as long as you can catch 3 units with it, it's worth it.
Yeah, there's the worth already.
Yeah.
Flock of Doom, a direct damage area of effect. Basically the same sort of range as like your augment, except from it's mainly used against large amounts of infantry.
Yeah.
More or less. It's the
Chaffee infantry.
yeah, it's the replacement for Burning Head for vortex spells for the Law of Beasts, more or less.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Bees.
do a huge amount of damage, but it's pretty good at whittling stuff down at 6 minutes of magic. You can overcast it to extend its duration by like double, which means it's going to do a lot more damage, and also you can cast it from further away. Much further away. You can cast it 200 meters extra. It's quite an upgrade for an overcast.
Yeah.
Not only is it extra damage, but it's also an increased cast range. But you are doubling the cost there as well for that. But again, double the damage.
From 6 to 12.
So yeah, if you've got like a blob of sort of, it doesn't really scale based on armor. So as long as it's high model count infantry,
Yeah.
it's really good against.
It's like Fate of Buna, but way not
Worse,
as
and then
powerful.
it's spread out. It's more like you spread it all out in an AOE. So if you can hit the maximum number, I think maybe it would do about the same amount of damage as Fate. If you spread out into the entire enemy army, maybe. But again, it's a grey spell. It's only 6 Winds of Magic. If you're expecting a large amount of infantry, there's no reason not to bring
Yeah.
this.
Especially if you can catch 2 or 3 of them with
Yeah.
once cast.
Then you probably already got the worth out of it if you just cast like 2 or 3 units in it. Because it's only like what 86 gold.
Yeah, it is.
It's really cheap. Amber Spear is basically the magic missile, although it's very different from typical magic missiles. It is not anything like its other variants, like in Fireball, Soul Quench. It is primarily used for very unique tactics. That being, that if you can get a very good angle with your caster, you can delete an entire unit. If you get it down the barrel, so like down the lengthways of a longbear unit, you'll delete the entire unit. It says magic missile, but it's basically a really awkward to aim breath spell.
Yeah.
It's not
Get your
amazing.
caster on a chariot or a horse,
Yeah.
get him around, and get a good shot off.
Yeah, I think the only usage this really had was that the fact that Beastmen didn't really have much of a breath spell, or at least an armor piercing breath spell, or any kind, so they just used this to delete like iron breakers down barrel, because you put a beast caster on a chariot, like Psycho said, or a horse, you run them real close to the side, so you can hit it lengthways, and you shoot it down the barrel. If it hits right, then it does like more damage than any breath spell could. But you need to know how to aim it, and you also need to know what you're aiming at. If you just shoot this like flat value into the center of a unit, it's not going to really do anything. And not to mention, it doesn't even do that much damage. I mean, maybe we'll see in the battle how much it does to single entities, but I don't think it's that much. I think it's like 200 max.
Yeah, it's not that great.
And for 7 Winds of Magic, you really need to be really specific on how you're using this. But you can upgrade it to increase its damage by quite a bit. I don't know how much that does though. I don't know if that already makes it like good against single entities or not. We'll have to see if that was tested, eh?
Yes.
On to the next is Pond's Impenetrable Pelt. It's bit weird.
It's effectively, what is it? Thing of Thorns where it's physical resist?
Yeah, but where Shield of Thorns, like, I could see this being used if you're moving a unit and it's being shot at. That is basically its only usage. Because it's quite counterintuitive. If you're using it when it's in melee, then why are you giving it speed? And if you're using it when it's moving and it's not getting shot at, why are you giving it physical resistance?
No, you're using it on the charge.
On the charge, eh? The speed,
because
the speed increases charge bonus, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. To use on the
Relative
charge.
to
There you go.
charging, yeah. So, you would use it on like Minotaurs or Centaurs or whatever,
You have to time
or
them, yeah.
any unit to increase it by 24%. And then because you're casting it, I think
It also
Thing of
gives the.
Beasts gives the.
No, it's not. I
Charge.
think it's Law of Wilds that gives the charge bonus. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Shit. What's the bonus for?
Law of Beast, I think it's. Let's have a look. Beastmen. Can't wait till they have more subfactions, eh?
All right.
I know, right? That's Wild Beast. Here we are. I think it's a reduce into. Oh no, it's an increase to power recharge and reserve rates. So it's just basic, more magic, basically.
That's fine, honestly. But yeah, so
Yeah, good on the pretty much for the charge. Although it does have a full 44-second duration.
yeah,
Which is
which
definitely
is
longer than the charge
good
lasts.
in the sense that like it's a matter of that you would charge and you'd hit them, and then the 22% would keep your boys alive.
Alive for a
long
bit
enough
longer,
to
yeah.
do the damage, right?
Yeah. So basically, it's
Because
like
the
if it's on the
problem-
charge or if you've got a fast-moving unit that's getting shot at, they're your situations. Because it is a
Because the good-
percentage-based thing, so if something has more speed, has more charge bonus, then you want to use it on the thing with the
More
most speed.
Yeah, and it's kind of and the 44 seconds make it so that you can pretty reliably use it when your unit is pretty far out before hitting their charge.
Overcasting it gives an area effect, which, if you're really good at timing charges and you're really good at placing your area effect spells, then sure, go for it.
Or you decided to create a death ball out of 5 units a minute.
Just to charge with, yeah. If you want to do that,
It just drams straight through the center. Like,
Yeah,
what are
if
you gonna
wanna
do?
just give everyone cancer? Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
should go for it. You're nuts. Go crazy. Again, 44 seconds, area of effect. It's basically Shield of Thorns,
Bestial cancer.
but with speed instead of base weapon damage, which is most helpful on the charge.
Yeah.
Curse of Anna, Go ahead.
And are here.
Anna here.
Anna here. Anna here.
And
right
Anra
here.
here.
Anra here.
Anra here.
There you go.
So it's AoE Hex.
Spell.
AoE Hex that reduces melee attack, accuracy, and speed. A real mix mash of things there. Like-
All the things that a Beastman player wants the enemy to have.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Yeah, it really debuffs a bunch of things that really don't interact.
With each other at all. Like, you want the accuracy on the ranged units, you want the speed on the cavalry, and you want the melee attack on the infantry in the front line.
It's like it's like the
It's a
Swiss
jack of
Army
all
knife
trades
of spells.
Master
Yeah,
of none.
you could
because
tech
it's
cav.
not that good.
Actually, if they've got skirmish cav, you could possibly you could.
Yeah,
have
there
two
you go. There's all when they're all three. If you catch them as well, you
Yeah, that-
lower their speed, you catch them with their reduced melee attack, and they can't shoot as well.
Yeah, so
And the overcast
overall,
increases the range by 15 meters.
wow, it's
The-
already 40 meters. How big is that?
Yeah, 55. That's a big old cast range. I'd say if you're up against a box, then yeah, because you can like hit the missile units in the
Actually,
center.
I think you could,
as
like,
well as
most
everything else.
boxes, you could just slap it in the center and it hits everyone.
Although then again, boxes are mainly there to hold out, so you'd rather reduce melee defense than melee attack. But
Well, the
it's
thing
a come
is,
as
the
you go.
Beastmen have so much melee attack in the first place that they could just overrun.
Do they?
Because the thing.
They have a
the
lot of
thing
charge
is-
bonus. I'm not sure about melee attack.
Yeah, the melee attack is fine.
Hmm.
But the key thing is with the problem with Beastmen is that they can't take hits.
No.
That's why the minus 24 melee attack is really important.
24.
Yeah, which is really big. And it's 39 seconds. That's 39 seconds that if you use that against dwarves, they won't hit you. They just can't.
But outside of Beastmen, useless, more or less, I'd say.
Not
Because there are
really
the debuff spells that reduce accuracy, there are debuff spells that reduce melee attack, and they do way better job than these do, and for not that much magic.
Yeah. Well, the only real reason you might want to bring it is because of how massive that area.
There's a
effect
big old
is.
area effect. But all these
Like-
spells are looking pretty middling, so why do you go bring Law of Beasts? You bring it for this one. Transformation of Kadon. This is like the
summon a
reason you
mana
bring
core.
beasts. Summons, we'll mention this in this is future laws, but summons are probably the best thing that magic can do. Better than healing, better than resurrection, because you're just getting a manticle. You can send this after a lightly armored enemy lord. You can send this after their caster, and they'll do a real good job. And not to mention,
Now-
it's a terror-causing manticle, so you
Yep.
can just send it into infantry and terrorize it off. For 18 winter magic, this used to be lower. I think it used to be 16 winter magic, didn't it?
Yeah, it used to be.
It is still really good. Just being able to
Yeah,
summon
pretty
a
good.
manticle is insanely good.
because here's a couple of things with summoning units as well, is that the unit itself doesn't count as a part of your army. It doesn't cost any. It has no value, meaning that instantly losing the Manic Core won't hurt your army's standing in
Nope.
like not getting army losses as well. Also, you could just throw it away. There's no reason not to just throw it at something and keep them busy.
Yeah, but it actually affects the balance of power. So if you're really
Yeah.
low, you throw in a or if your opponent is really low, you throw in a Manticore, and it can actually like cause army losses to appear
Yeah.
because it.
If we
Because of the difference.
if we have a look at the old the price of a Feral Manticore, 800 gold, and you can get 2 of these for a Beastcaster that say like even if you just bring it, just the spell itself is only 231 gold. You can make upwards to nearly, if you're getting the right targets, you can make upwards to about 2,000 gold off of the Transformation Icodon.
Yeah.
It is it's probably one of the best summons in the game as well.
But
Like,
you're
Manticores
using
are the ideal.
magic as well.
Yeah, you're basically using all your magic winter magic on this,
Yeah, you gotta get 36 to cast them both.
and you can't even see the values at the end of the game. I wish that they should add that where you can see the summoned and how much damage they dealt at the end, but
Yeah.
we'll never know exactly how much damage that Manticore got. But I'm sure he did well.
Yeah. Or all those rats, am I right?
Yeah, but you can see here from the fact that you always want to be summoning both of these. Like in a battle, you just want to focus this first before anything else. And when you're using up 36 of your winds of magic, you don't really have much magic left for the rest of the Lore of Beasts.
Yeah, unless you're using like Flock of Doom or something.
Yeah, it's basically just Flock of Doom and Wyson's Wildform that you're going to have enough magic for. Especially not the Curse of Anathrena, which just makes it even worse when you have to pair it up against Transformation Icodon, which is just really, really worth the magic. And this is middling worth the magic at best.
Yep.
So yeah, best spell in the lore. Maybe even one of the best spells in the game. It's up there.
Because summoning a terror-causing unit is really good.
Yeah. And for that price, it's still really good.
Unless you're, summoning a Psygor, that is.
Oh yeah, Cygor's also really good. Unfortunately, Cygors aren't as quick moving, so...
Probably
Yeah, but they got a
Manticore's still
big
better
bump
because
off
you
the
have a
rock.
flying.
Yeah,
terror.
flying so it can move. Yeah, the rocks are pretty good still, though, but they don't
Yeah,
cause
but
terror,
rocks-
though. And also, you can't... throwing a rock at... Like, Cygor's better if you're dealing with heavy infantry. That's basically the situation.
Also,
Manticore's better for
really
literally
funny.
everything else. Anyway,
Power
onto
of
Dark Magic. The unique lore to... well, it used to be unique to Dark Elves. Now Blood Elves have access to it as well, don't they? In their caster.
Yes.
They got a basic caster that can do it, and Ariel gets the occasional spell too. Starting off with a bit of a really unique spell, with the only really one of its kind, Power of Darkness. 3 charges. It's an augment, but you're basically just using something as a battery. You cause damage to a friendly unit, and in exchange you get rare power. I don't know if there's any... Is there anything special about this spell? I don't know if it scales from
Cast
the
it on
damage you do.
summoned units, and you can cast it on allied units if you're in a 2v2.
That's basically it. Is the amount of damage always constant, or does it scale depending on the unit you use on?
I think it's basically.
It's constant.
I think it's constant. Probably kill off a lot of models from single, not single entity units.
Do you have the amount that it gives back?
Ooh, I'm not quite sure now.
I'm not quite sure
Never
now.
used this because.
If I had to guess, I say it's about
Because how
between 10 and 20.
Okay. So, alright. So how Arcane Conduit works is it increases how much current power reserve and recharge rate you have for that period of
Yeah,
time.
but it disappears afterwards, yeah.
And then disappears.
Yeah,
It's
so it does
usually
scale
Arcane
because-
Conduit
yeah.
tends to
Okay,
be
so
like
it's
45.
46 damage. Damage chance is 0.75. And it regenerates mana regeneration times 0.6. And
Yeah,
the
because
maximum damage entity is 1, so it has 10 ticks. So it can do 460 damage total, and only 345 on single entities. So you trade 345 up to 460 for. I don't know how to calculate it.
Yeah, the Winds of Magic, it would vary depending on how much you'd already used. Depending on what your current recharge rate is, and what, like, how much you already have in reserve, depends on how quickly you can get it back. Because if you've used, like, 50,000 spells, and your recharge rate is at, like, 3 minutes, then using this is only going to increase it to, like, 2 minutes. You're probably going to get, like, none back, more or less. It is best to use this earliest in the game, when you've used the least amount of spells. You want to be using this
in
right
the middle probably is
Yeah.
latest.
You do not want to be using this at the end of the game because you're going to get basically no usage out of it for sacrificing a unit. Unless you're like sacrificing... Because I think it still works on shattered units. You can use this on a shattered unit. If you can see it, click on it, you should...
Back and it was fixed now.
Oh, is it? Ah, that's a shame. You can use it on routing units for sure, though. Don't know if
Yeah.
it affects shattered units. But if you just have some routed Dreadspear unit that you want to see die for some reason, because you're into that, I don't know. And just use this on it.
Time.
Use Power of Darkness. And you get some magic back as well. Pretty much always worth bringing, because then you can cast more Soul Stealers. Anyway, Chill Wind. It's a wind spell. It doesn't do a huge amount of damage. In fact, it doesn't do much at all.
It's no, it's not. Yeah, it's
For a
like
wind spell.
Same shape as Edbutt, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, it's a straight line.
What-
It's like a Burning Head,
like
straight line.
a Scourge.
Yeah. Straight line sort of thing. But it's only 5 winds of magic, and it reduces speed by 24%. Against, and it also says it's good against armor, although I don't remember it being good against armor, but I guess it is. Which means it's a pretty good constant damage though. For 5 winds of magic, you can do, if you line it up correctly, like along the front line, you can do a good chunk of damage. Nothing to really scare anyone, but you can take away about a fifth of their health.
Yeah.
And also the
Or
speed
quarter
debuff can
of
affect
front
like
armor.
charging or something. If they're charging, you can affect that as well. So yeah, it's worth bringing. It adds, if you overcast it, it basically just increases the effect from Frostbite from just 24% speed to 48% speed, and also reload
Also,
skill.
wait.
I don't know
it
why
also
reload skill.
Gives them reload speed.
I
debuff.
feel like they threw that in for no reason. I don't know why being cold only affects reload skill now, but I guess it does for some reason.
Like, I guess if you had like someone who's sitting there with sisters, you could pop it on them and be
Yeah,
like,
they would work pretty
"Reload."
well as sisters, I guess, or if they're trying to like run away with some archers or something. If you've got some archers that you know you're going to chase down in a minute.
Yeah, or as well, again, if you want them to shoot slower, or skirmished cav actually.
Hmm. But again, it's a grey spell. It's really inoffensive. Why not throw it in? It's like you don't use it until you've run out of magic to use Soul Stealer. Then you
Yeah.
use it. You save it right till last. Next, Word of Pain. A really big debuff. Minus 40 melee attack is a lot. That is basically the melee attack of most units.
And a minus 30 melee accuracy.
Yeah, which you know is also weird why it's there. I feel like they just sort of
That's
mush
really
things
big,
together for some
though.
reason. 40 melee attack for 40 seconds. 8 winds of magic. You can basically prevent a unit from doing damage for 40 seconds. In melee, that is. So if you pop this on... Example. Give me an example.
Dragon Princess.
Dragon Princess, boom, they do nothing. They do something with the charge still, but that's it.
Drop it
After
on
that,
a-
they won't do anything.
dro- you drop it on a unit of handgunners, and they somehow keep missing. at
Yeah.
point blank.
I mean, it's 30 accuracy. I don't know how much accuracy is a lot of accuracy because it's not a base stat. So it's kind of hard to tell how much that means or what that does.
Pretty much it's double of what I think almost double. It's like 1 1/2 of what the fucking Master Engineer gives cannons.
Doing your thing about like that probably does affect it quite a bit. But again, the accuracy does scale with range, doesn't it? So it depends how close you
Yeah,
are
it
to it
does.
and everything.
But if you want to really, again, it's like if you're dealing, it's like, oh, I brought my 2 Sisters of Avalor, and it's like, okay, well, one of them's gonna do nothing.
Yeah, one of them's gonna miss.
A lot.
But then again, accuracy is more of a chance thing, whereas melee attack is guaranteed. So you're usually using
Yeah.
this for the melee attack debuff.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, because, damn, minus 40, man.
I mean, if you overcast it, also add in minus 24 melee defense, which is even more of a hex. It does only
Oh.
affect a single target, but you can basically make that single target terrible in melee for 40
Well,
seconds.
Think of it like enfeebling foe. At that point,
Yeah.
you just toss it onto some poor bastard to decide to fight your lord.
Yeah, because it's got even more of an
Someone
effect.
coming after Malekith, drop that shit, and then he'll beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, pretty good debuff. Unfortunately, Soul Stealer exists. No. Next spell, Blade Wind. I think, oh, actually, is this the cheapest? No, how much is Chain Lightning, Winds of Magic wise? Is it 10?
No, it's 11.
In that case, oh yeah, it's Blade Wind tied with it then, for cheapest Vortex. I always thought Chain Lightning was just straight up
Yeah,
cheapest.
it's a vortex with blades.
Yeah,
that-
it's weak against
Yeah.
armor, so it's like a
you
burning
wanna
head.
use it on chaff.
Yeah, you want to use it generally on Chav. It's really cheap.
Uh,
11 Winds of Magic, 7-second duration is really short for a Vortex spell.
If you overcast it,
If you overcast
you
it,
get 14 seconds.
it's 14 seconds instead, which is double the length of time. Which does actually help in this situation because 7 seconds is really short. you might find it falling short sometimes.
It's probably the vortex spell that you actually want to overcast.
Yeah, probably the only one you want to overcast. Yeah. Throw it into like a mass formation, and it'll probably get its value out of it. Unfortunately, when you're targeting cheap infantry, you don't tend to get a lot of value out of it. Try and throw it on archers if you can. That'd probably be a good target. Overall, it's a bit of a vortex spell, but it's still a vortex spell. Doombolt.
It is. It's
bombardment?
the one that comes from the sky.
Yeah, it's called a bombardment. It's basically just a magic missile that you cast from the sky instead.
Oh, it's more like God's like, Ayo, what
God's
up?
wrath.
Throw some rocks down at you.
Some bombardment of hell. Pretty good against almost everything. It's a real one-size-fits-all sort of spell. It can't really be realistically be dodged despite being a bombardment spell. If you're really sneaky and you've got a really small model, like maybe you've got like a Lord of the Pegasus, then you can usually dodge it.
Yeah.
But even then, it's about 50% of the time.
Anything that's a dragon or
Yeah, or a unit, and you're not gonna miss. Just depends on where you hit it.
I think only cavalry would be able to.
Even cavalry
get out.
probably wouldn't be able to get out of it most of the time.
Like they'd lose only 1 or 2.
Well, yeah, it
models,
depends on where they hit them. Yeah, you can minimize the effect when it comes to cavalry.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does a good explosion and it does good single target damage as well. So it does pretty good against everything. It can do if you've got like a fleeing unit, like just anything, just fire at anything. I don't think it does much against artillery though because its targeting pattern always targets the center, so it won't usually hit the artillery models. But it's a pretty good spell overall.
Yeah.
Overcasting it just increases the damage by a good chunk as well. It increases its armor piercing value as well, so it's better against armor targets and just that's damage that can't be negated with armor at all. Unfortunately, it's 16 with the magic and Soul Stealer exists. Anyway, on to Soul Stealer. Yeah, it's up there with one of the best spells in the game again. It's healing and it's also damage, and it's an AOE. It's really good. It's insanely good. You
For 18 ones of magic, as much as the transformation spell with the Manticore.
Yes, and when you're getting both healing and damage out of it, it's really good. Especially because the only people that cast this really are Morathi, Malekith, and Ariel, who are all basically hybrid lords. Because when it comes to like the Supreme Sorceress of Dark, it's not as good because you're not going to be able to heal your caster too often, unless you're using
Unless you're
Power of
losing.
Darkness. unless you're losing. But when you
Yeah,
come to like Malekith and Morathi, which are things you have in melee, that's the perfect situation for them, where you can heal them and also do damage to everything around. I think it's mainly good against single entities, but generally it does damage against everything. Like you just want to you don't really care about what you're hitting. You just want to hit as many units as possible, because the more units that you hit, the more healing you get. So if you use this on a really, I don't know if does it have a hit cap? Can it hit only a certain number of units? I swear it has
Yes,
Oh.
can only hit a certain number of models.
models,
yeah.
is it?
Let me check if I can find out.
But overall, you just want to be hitting as many units as possible with Soul Stealer.
Yeah, max. No, it doesn't have a maximum unit count, but it will only take 1 unit at a time. So if you have like multi-model,
slowly-
you're probably
it's
not
slowly-
going to get a lot of healing out of it. But
Doesn't it? I swear it's scale. I swear I get healed more when I hit more units.
yeah,
No,
it
no.
hits more. It doesn't have a maximum amount of units that it can hit, but it
So-
only
so
like
what-
does damage and healing.
Yeah.
It subtract healing from 1 model, and it only has 6 ticks. So
Alright.
like, it will only kill 6 spearmen probably.
But so you're getting more out of it, the more units you hit. You want to hit as many as possible with this.
Biggest blob you can find.
Yeah. The more you hit, the more value you're going to get. And it does do a good chunk of damage as well as healing. And when you put this in an AoE form, you can really, it's normally a spread out sort of value, but it's a lot of value. One of the best spells in the game. There's a reason only Dark Elves really get access to it. Because if you gave this to like any Vampire Lord, they'd go nuts. If you gave this to any other Lord, basically any Lord, you gave this to, it's insane. Can't be overcasted though. And it does have a 100% miscast chance. Although I don't know what that means.
That means that you always damage yourself when you cast it.
Do you? I haven't noticed that.
Yes.
If I do, I don't think it's very much. I don't know. Maybe it's just because there's always a Malekith on a dragon.
Out the heal, right?
Yeah. So it'll usually heal the overcast damage caused anyway.
But if you make a poor casting choice,
That might
you
not.
just lose more health than you gain.
Yeah. But if you use it right, one of the best spells in the game. And that is it for the last 2 laws. All we have left is the replay to cover.
Yes.
Yas.
And then closing remarks about the two laws. Empire and Dark Elves. You didn't bring Marissa or Mac. What is
No.
that? Why is there so many bearded men on the left side?
No,
Because,
banana batteries.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good point.
They only
Forgot.
have one
Unit
item.
caps off, right?
And
Yeah.
also, I wanted like, I didn't do it, but like 5 spirit leeches at the same time. Actually, it wouldn't scale because it is one effect, so you wouldn't.
Yeah,
only
yeah,
get
you
one
can't
effect
stack them,
per spirit
unfortunately.
leech, but
Yeah.
just imagine that for a second.
If you just do the one after another, by the time the last one's done it, you can just the other one,
Yeah.
the first one will be recharged to be an infinite chain of some spirit leech.
That's why you can't
Endless
bring 8
spirit
casters.
leech.
Wait,
With
why
or
is
just
that
2
one
casters with the same
already
spell.
out?
Yeah, no, what I wanted to
'Cause-
show off why I took the Ember Wizard is because, as you see, I have 2, and one of them is flying, because Empire
Yeah.
Ember Wizards
Yeah,
get access to a Hippogriff unit mount.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
no
Unique
other
thing.
caster gets a
Fun- if you-
terror-causing mount.
If you wanted to be a real pain in the ass, you could bring Boris on his hippogriff with 2 other hippogriffs with the embers.
It's also a
With
very
his-
pretty hippogriff. It's a wild one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look how nice that looks.
Okay, quick.
Nice little picture. Anyway, let's
There
get
will
this
also
go
be a
through.
disadvantage, maybe some of you will guess, which you will see later. Okay. And 1 minute, you will see the Soul Stealer. It will be in the forest because I marched my single entities out because we wanted to showcase.
Yeah,
it
you can
for
split out
single
the
entities.
whole overall damage dealt to single entities. Won't be able to look at the healing, but it's I think it heals 1-to-1 for healing. Pretty sure it does.
Yeah, no, I think it only heals.
Is it?
In set in description, total amount of healing you can get is 600.
600 healing.
But
Yeah,
also
roughly.
the miscast chance only applies when you're overcasting. So
No, you can't overcast Soul
you
Stealer.
can't.
You can't.
What the
You take damage when you cast it, but you heal out of it.
Does
you
he?
don't actually
Yeah,
notice
so
it.
Hard to
it
tell.
doesn't matter.
Let's have a look.
Alright.
Yeah,
He has
see,
taken no
actually,
damage.
yeah. No, sorry.
Yeah, don't know what that miscast chance is about because he's
Maybe you
taken
used to be able to overcast it.
flat nothing.
Yeah, and now the
Ah,
Wolf.
Doombot coming down, so you can see here he's on 2,358 HP. Let's see how much it does. Yeah, good chunk. That is about 700 damage?
No.
600?
Yes, yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, 600,
Yeah.
600, 700.
So,
But we can look at the health pools of here. It's a bit random because of how the targeting effect thing works, but on average, about 400 damage each.
Yeah.
And when you split that out against like as many units as you want, it does pretty well. 400 damage times 5. That's 2,000 damage done from one spell. It's split
Times
out,
6.
so it's not as flashy, but still pretty good.
Okay. Next we have.
What happens next?
Blade Wind at 3 minutes 10 around.
I got Blade Wind coming in. So yeah, these guys 80 armor, so not as much of an effect, but still, because the slow moving speed actually comes an advantage there because it means the units will get hit for longer.
I also did the vortex trick there a bit. Managed to get it to come straight towards my caster.
The classic vortex trick.
Wait.
Okay, in about 15 seconds, Chill Wind, I think on the front line of Spearman.
Yeah, in front line of speed.
Yeah, there it goes. You can see the damage done there. No models killed, but still, good chunk of damage.
that's a third of their health.
Yeah,
For 5 winds of magic.
yeah, definitely worth bringing most of the
If
time.
you move back to the Dark Elves, you see the Ember Spear.
Oh wait, there's a word of pain coming down there. So yeah, well obviously Spearmen have like no melee attacks, so this is just overkill. Unfortunately, Armor Spear kind of had to get the usage out of it here because of the angle.
Yeah. The
It doesn't
angle's
work.
not
As you'll see here, it'll just go straight into the ground as an overcasted one as well. But yeah, still huge amount of damage. Now, if I imagine for a second you're at foot level and you manage to put it through 3 different units, that is insane.
Yeah,
If you know how to
would
aim that thing,
delete everything.
you can really have some real good plays with that.
Best usage is against dwarves. You can literally delete dwarven units or
Mhm.
make more than one dwarven units.
Yeah,
I think so. Replace with Falcon used it. He deleted like 3 units in one.
One Armor Spear, yeah. It's insane amount of damage. And of course, their transformation I put on. I forget the exact time limit. I think it's 120 seconds that summons lasts for. Yeah, it's 61 seconds until the summoned unit starts to degrade. It doesn't take a lot of damage when it degrades, and then that lasts for another 60 seconds, I think.
Yeah. But,
So right now there's no debuffs. He's basically just a regular Manticore, but after 60 seconds he starts to take a little damage over time.
doesn't it
we'll
have
a
3 stages?
flock of doom.
Yeah, the last stage of it just disintegrates into nothingness.
Flock of doom should be hitting right.
Flock of Doom here.
Oh yeah.
Right there.
Only hit him to 1 unit, but you can see how much unit does damage to 1 unit, and then I don't think it'll do that damage to
Oh
all
yeah,
units in
because
range.
it has
So.
to be the center. Yeah.
Yeah. So that did
it was two
about
more to the left. That was
about 500 damage.
500.
500 damage. So if you hit that on multiple units, really good.
Yeah.
And there goes the Manticore and the Doom Bolt.
If you get
It's
at
only
least-
like 6 points of magic, so it's like rather cheap to get it.
Yeah.
So you can take the transformation of Kedon, and you take the Flock of Doom to just have like a cheap spell that you can use once you've run out of your Manticores.
Yeah, last final overview of the laws. That's not the right button. That's the right button. So Law of Beasts, but pretty much all the time. I mean, there's no reason why you wouldn't want a Manticore summon, except for again against maybe dwarfs. Pretty much anything else, a Manticore summon's gonna get its value back. So not something you usually need to build around. If you're going for some sick Amber Spear plays, then maybe you do. But pretty much a really inoffensive law you can bring almost all the time. The other spells, all the spells are pretty inoffensive, and you can bring them whenever. There's nothing too specifically situational when it comes to them. So really just pick and choose when it comes to Law of Beasts. Law of Dark is just... I mean, you're going to bring it because you're playing Malekith or Morathi.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you bring Soul Stealer. Maybe you bring Power of Darkness and Chillwind. The other ones are negligible
Doom Bolt.
because Soul Stealer exists, unfortunately. Much Doom Bolt is a pretty good spell. It's in this Law of Magic, so Soul Stealer exists, and you'd rather just spend it on more Soul Stealer.
Well, yeah.
Because I think Soul Stealer was what? How much damage was Doom Bolt? 700?
700 damage.
Soul Stealer did about 400, and it also heals you. And you can do it to multiple things.
Yeah, but also it's more expensive.
Well, yeah, but healing.
7 wins of magic, and yeah.
Actually, was that an overcast? Was that an
Yeah,
overcast Doom Bolt or was it a
but-
regular Doom Bolt?
It was just
That's
regular.
regular.
I didn't see that if it's an overcast or not.
Yeah,
Against the
overcasted
board.
probably would be up to 1,000.
So if you're going for those single entity targets, yeah, Doom Bolt probably more worth it a bit. If you're
Yeah.
more concerned about the healing and the AoE, which is where the money
But
comes from.
here's
Soul
the
Stealer.
thing, especially if you're using someone like Morathi, you don't want to use Soul Stealer because something has gone horribly wrong.
Even then, Marathi is kind of a hybrid lord, sort of. It depends what kind of. It depends on what situation
Oh.
you're using Marathi in. If you're using her with a Death Blob, where you bring her with like a Master and a Hag, then yeah, you want Soul Stealer because you have that sort of like Death Bolt thing that you going on. But if you bring her just to fly around and do nothing, then yeah, don't bring Soul Stealer.
I mean, honestly, even then, if you're like unlucky with her or
Yeah.
charging in the back of a unit, you can probably like just do the damage effect.
Yeah,
onto a kind of
probably.
big
You just
cannon.
probably wouldn't use it as much as you would with everything else. Whereas every other situation, you're using it constantly. That's you're probably using it once, and then you're throwing a Doom Bolt down. Maybe you throw a Word of Pain, then you restore your magic, then you throw something else. But yeah, again, it's hard to call this in an inoffensive law because if you're playing Dark Elves, I'd really hope you're bringing it.
Yeah.
There's much else to it. You just bring it, and you use it.
Like, you can make Soul Stealer your only spell and still have some use, like be able to
Yeah.
have your caster be used.
Full usage out of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
really good. Pretty good law of magic, just because Soul Stealer exists. But yeah, that is it for today. We've covered how many laws is that?
6.
6 laws. Next week we'll cover probably another 6.
Yep.
And then the week after we'll be doing Beastmen versus Lizardmen, I think.
Yes.
And then the week
Yeah.
after we should be able to jump back and do the rest of the laws. I think that sounds like a good schedule to work out things.
Oh yeah.
So thank you all for watching. I'm going to stop the recording now and farewell.